So Matthew's here with the business news. Of course, Asian markets have been reacting overnight to the news that Spain's bank's getting a bailout. We've got to wait for the European ones, just over an hour to go. But what's happened in Asia?
Well, that's right, Stuart. Yes, they're the first ones to have a chance, so we've been keeping an eye on them this morning. And the markets have been responding very positively to news from the weekend that Spain is getting this bailout to help its banks. That's how things are trading at the moment. The Hang Seng managing over 2%. The Shanghai Composite's holding back a little bit. That's due to some data over the weekend. We'll talk about that in a moment. Other things we've been looking at are what's happening to the euro. It's strengthened, actually, in the last few hours as well. Sign of a bit more confidence. We can take a look as well at how Wall Street wrapped up last week. And, of course, markets in the US will have their chance to respond later today. But actually, it was quite a good week in the end for Wall Street. It's a bit rocky, but the S&P 500 there, that finished up 3.7% on the week overall, which was pretty good. Well, so as we see there, that news cheering markets for the time being. Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has said that we shouldn't call this package a bailout. It's more a credit line. Well, whatever it's called, ultimate responsibility for paying back these funds will lie with the Spanish government.
Spain has agreed to a rescue of its troubled banking sector by the Eurozone. Just don't call it a bailout, please.
If we hadn't done what we did over the last 5 months, what we would have faced yesterday would have been a bailout of Spain. But as we have been doing our homework for the last 5 months, what was put before us and what was decided on was the opening of a line of credit for our financial system.
A line of credit that could go as high as 100 billion euros. Officials are waiting on the results of 2 independent audits to confirm the final amount. The Spanish government estimates 30% of its banks need recapitalization, as they struggle with toxic loans and assets related to the collapse of the real estate bubble in 2008. The assistance will not come with outside control over government budgets, like that imposed on Greece, Ireland, and Portugal when they sought bailouts. But it's still likely to impact the government's balance sheet.
It'll be counted as Spanish public debt, so if the banks and the government's fund are not able to return the money, the state will have to return it.
The government will funnel the money through its fund for orderly bank restructuring. It will be responsible for collecting repayments from the banks with interest and returning that money to the Eurogroup. With the economy stuck in its second recession in 3 years, Spaniards worry the loan means yet more cutbacks. The government has promised the only new reforms will be to its banking sector.
Well, markets happy so far about that bailout or that credit line, but there are reports over the weekend that Ireland was not so happy about the terms of the deal that Spain got. Now, you might remember that Ireland also got a bailout back in November 2010, 85 billion euros, almost the same amount. Also, a lot to do with the banks, similar problems. There are reports over the weekend that they felt that Spain's this very light touch supervision that Spain is now going to get was a bit unfair, given the very tough supervision programme that Ireland's under. However, we've heard that Michael Noonan, the Irish finance minister, has said no, they're not unhappy about it. They're quite happy with the deal that they struck. I suppose they would say that, wouldn't they?
Exactly.
And those reports are unfounded.
Poor old Irish, not happy about their bailout, not very happy about the football either. Now, as you mentioned earlier, Matthew, that important data coming out of China at the weekend also affecting things.
Yes, yeah, we can take a look at that because of course, China is the real engine of the world economy at the moment. So keenly watch to see what's happening. And we had this rate cut on end of Thursday, which was a bit of a surprise, but which suggested to some people that perhaps there was some bad data coming out over the weekend. Well, we've now been able to look at that data, and it was a pretty mixed picture. We had figures on exports and imports, which were better than had been expected. A lot of commodities there in those import figures. Something to note, though, exports rising strongly, but to the European Union, they're only up 1.3% in the first 5 months of the year. That shows the weakness of the European economy. The data that was not so good came in the form of industrial production figures, 9.6%. Now, of course, this makes European countries countries' eyes water.
It
Figures
sounds
like that.
incredible, doesn't it?
But they're not. They're lower than what was expected for China. Inflation also a bit low there, and some banks, Citigroup notably, this morning saying that they think that the second quarter growth is going to be 7 to 7.5%. That'll be slower than we've seen for quite some time for China. Well, now let's get some more of the day's company news and a boost for the beleaguered Nasdaq exchange. Still reeling from criticism over the troubled Facebook IPO. Kraft Foods has said it will move to the Nasdaq from its current home, the New York Stock Exchange. The maker of Oreo cookies and Cadbury's chocolate says the move will save it money. It will also gain visibility for its brands from Nasdaq's marketing activities.
Airlines will continue to suffer from high oil prices and the Eurozone crisis in 2012. The industry's IATA group says profits would be 2.4 billion euros this year. That's down, though, more than half from the year before.
And the British drinks giant Diageo is looking at a stock market listing in Hong Kong. The company is already on the London and New York stock exchanges. An Asian listing could be useful as it grows its business in the region. Last year, sales were up by 18% in emerging markets. That compares to 8% growth overall.
We're going to talk to you about the UK now because the bunting for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee has all been taken down. The decorations instead for the upcoming Olympics, they've been pinned up everywhere. But not everyone is convinced that the country is set to gain from the summer of sport.
Putting up the finishing touches ahead of the Olympics. The Mayor of London has given every borough €61,000 to spend on decorations. Money well spent, according to these tourists.
It gives a drive, brings you in and it makes you in the mood. And I love the outside, like she was saying, the outside venues.
The open
They're
air.
great, the open air.
You know, shopping is really fun.
But Britons are worried this won't balance out the cost of the Games. Originally slated at around €2.8 billion, it could turn out to be more like $13 billion in the end. A bill mostly footed by the British taxpayer.
I don't take much notice of it all. You know, all this money that's being spent, we're going to be paying for it for years to come.
All this money that's being spent, you see, it's a second national circus, and there'll probably be many more because it's to divert the attention from the capitalist crisis.
The Games are expected to boost the UK's GDP by 0.2%, which is around €4 billion. The associated spike in demand over the summer could spare Britain from a fourth successive quarter of negative growth.
Weather forecast for August for London, apparently it's going to be gorgeous. Hopefully. Now, two of the biggest companies in the world, both holding big conferences this week.
Yes, and one of them is in a place where I think the weather's guaranteed to be gorgeous. They're in Florida. Now, this is Microsoft, who will be there, and Apple, who will be in San Francisco. Now, what they're doing is they're talking to developers because their products actually aren't so great, of course, unless you've got these apps and various other things that really make them sing. So they'll be talking to developers, trying to encourage them to do more. Now, for Apple, we've seen some interesting figures about why that's so important. The number of people downloading, or the number of downloads that they're seeing, is actually dropping. We can take a look at that. In the month of April, they were down 30%. These are the top 200 free
Still expect them to
apps.
be shooting up, wouldn't you?
You do, yeah. But it just shows that both Apple and Microsoft, they really need to motivate and incentivize developers to do things. So Apple will be talking about its new operating system. It also might unveil a new mapping application to rival the Google one that we're all used to. People are getting excited about that. Microsoft as well, it's got its Windows 8 system as well, which is going onto PCs and tablets, and it wants to get developers excited about those.
See if they manage to do so. Matthew, of course, will cover that story all this week here on France 24. That's the business and the news for now from me. Claire's got the very latest headlines at the top of the hour. Join her if you can.